Hi everyone, Grant for the Flame Learning channel. In this video, you'll take a close look at the new MasterGrade in Flame 2019. This next generation grading toolset is HDR ready and float point capable, and gives you amazing control over your grading capabilities in Flame, while accurately respecting the color sciences and information within a given color space. We'll be covering the general workings of the toolset, but please read the online documentation and application tooltips for detailed explanations of every available control. This video is not footage specific, so please use your own media to test and try things out. Now, the MasterGrade is loaded by default within the image timeline effects. So when you switch to the effects environment from the timeline, without applying a different timeline effects, the image timeline effects is applied and the MasterGrade shader is loaded automatically. Thinking of fast workflows, it's a quick way to take a sequence and start grading straight away. The reason for having the MasterGrade within the image module is that it allows you to access secondary selective operations that you use in combination with the MasterGrade toolset. Now, the MasterGrade is actually built on the Matchbox framework. This means you can load it within the image module, the Action 3D compositor, as well as a Matchbox node in batch. These tools are accessible to you wherever you work within Flame. For example, if you switch to batch, you'll find the image node in the batch node bin, and whatever you do here can also be achieved in the timeline effects. Now, I'm using three sources. We have a Rec 709 clip, a log clip, and a Scene Linear Rec 709 sRGB clip. The reason for showing you this is that one very important point regarding the MasterGrade is that it can work in video, log, and scene linear color space. You can choose whichever option you need, but you can always change this in the MasterGrade controls at any point in time. I'll switch to a 3-up view with Alt 3, and we'll look at the different image node controls. The first image node is using a video source, and I've defined the MasterGrade primaries to use the video mode. The primary video controls contain lift, gamma, gain, offset, and saturation. The second image node is using a log source, and I have defined the MasterGrade primaries to use the log mode. So with log mode, you get brightness, contrast, the pivot for the contrast, log gamma, and saturation. And finally, the third image node is using a scene linear image, and I have defined the node to use the scene linear primaries. This gives you exposure, contrast, a pivot adjustment for contrast, offset, and saturation. So each of the primary controls will offer you a tool set that is most effective for the type of media you are working with. And in every case, you can still switch to the controls menu and change the image type if you wish to change the primary toolset. This gives you maximum flexibility when choosing how to grade your image. Please keep in mind that the log and scene linear toolsets are designed to be used in connection with the proper viewing LUTs for those media types. When I toggle between the image nodes, you can see that the viewers are using the appropriate viewing transforms that were defined in the color management viewing rules for this project. Now, the sliders in the MasterGrade are somewhat different to other sliders in Flame. You can do vertical adjustments as well as horizontal adjustments. Just look at the cursor icon to see what mode you're in when doing the adjustment. One direction is not better than the other. This is a case of what is comfortable for you when adjusting the sliders. As a tip, for smaller increments, hold space and drag the sliders. And for larger incremental adjustments, hold Alt space and drag the sliders. Now, the other controls you have in the primaries is the color wheel. You can select a primary property and adjust the color by dragging the dot in any direction. If you click on the dot itself, your adjustment is constrained to only move the radius while preserving the angle. But if you click anywhere else in the color wheel, you're able to move the dot free from any constraints. It's also worth pointing out that the color coding at the bottom of the sliders matches the dots in the color wheel. So in the case of the scene linear primaries, the white dot is exposure, the gray dot is contrast, and the black dot is offset. This makes it visually easier to identify what is being affected in the color wheel. Now, if you prefer to add color using RGB sliders instead of the color wheel, hold Alt and swipe beneath the color wheel. This brings up a set of RGB sliders, and they are synchronized to the color wheel. So whatever adjustments you make in the color wheel will reflect in these sliders and vice versa. It's also worth noting that if you want the MasterGrade to start with the RGB sliders as opposed to the color wheel, you can set the default settings in the main preferences under the Timeline Effects Batch Effects section. The next menu in the MasterGrade is the Tone menu. The sliders you find here break up the image into 5 specific tonal ranges. For instance, each of the sliders allow you to make precise targeted adjustments to the black, shadows, midtones, highlights, and white of the image. The additional S-contrast slider allows you to preserve the black and white point while increasing and decreasing contrast within your image. Now to the right of the tonal sliders, you have the controls to define the regions within the tonal range. For example, you would select the highlights, and you can set the start point of the highlights, as well as the pivot, which determines how rapidly the adjustment is applied. These options will change depending on which tonal range you select. You can tweak any of the tonal ranges to target the precise region you want, and you'll obviously see the changes in the image, and the scopes will show the targeted region being affected as you make an adjustment. This is all real-time, so what you see in the image is accurately measured using the various scopes. Finally, in addition to shifting these specific tonal ranges, you can also influence their color using the color wheel. And similar to the primaries, the tonal range sliders are also color-coded to match what you see in the color wheel. The RGB sliders are also available using Alt and swiping beneath the wheel. The last menu in the MasterGrade is the Controls menu. The Image Type Settings is where you can switch between the 3 grading toolsets. Note that this changes not only the primary controls, but also the response of the tone controls. Now you can set the default image type if you need to always access a certain set of grading controls. Call up the Main Preferences menu and go to the Timeline Effects Batch Effects section. Here you will find the settings for the MasterGrade. By default, the project working space will set the MasterGrade to adopt whichever color space controls you defined in the project's color policy. In this case, it is scene linear. So each time you apply the MasterGrade, it will use scene linear grading controls. However, you can set the initial controls to video, log, or scene linear, regardless of the working color space. So you have a great starting point, but you can still change it whenever you need. Going back to the Controls menu, you can also clamp the black or white of the image for specific deliverables, and the black and white pivots allow you to change their reference points when doing primary adjustments. This is typically used when black is not at 0 or white is not at 1. Just be aware that the pivots only affect the video and log controls. Finally, for those of you who don't remember the gestural swipe to toggle between the color wheel and the RGB sliders, just toggle this option to switch the controls. There is also a default setting for this in the main preferences. So that is a very high-level overview of the MasterGrade and all the controls it has to offer. Please remember to look at the tooltips as well as the online documentation for detailed descriptions of each slider and its uses. Now you have a lot of flexibility using the MasterGrade, and you can use any controls with any material. However, if you're trying to maintain a good color standard, a final piece of advice is to tag your material correctly. Doing this in combination with the correct viewing LUTs should give you a really good grading workflow, which also allows for certain automation, as well as making it easier to create multiple deliverables at the end of a production. Don't forget to also check out the other features, workflows, and enhancements to Flame 2019. Comments, feedback, and suggestions are always welcome and appreciated. Please subscribe to the Flame Learning channel for future videos, and thanks for watching.